Dragon Ballers, if you're looking to buy Dragon Ball Super or One Piece sealed product, make sure to get 5% off using my link to Mystic TCG down in the description. You can also sell cards to them using their Facebook link, which is also down in the description. Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, as we do with each new ban list that comes out, we're talking about the winners and the losers of the set 20 power absorb ban list. These are the strategies that both benefit and lose as a result of the cards that were hit on the set 20 ban list. We'll talk about that in today's video and just talk about some indications as to where the meta may go from here. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys are buying any new cards for any new decks you think that might be good in this format, definitely use my link in the description to TCG Play. It really does help me out quite a bit, and I really would appreciate it. Anyways, let's jump right on into things. We are starting with the Champa ban. Now, I think this one is a little bit indirect because obviously Champa is not part of any clear archetype. But where I really think Champa leads to losers is in the mid-range shell of Dragon Ball Super. Here's the thing, like, control decks don't need Champa to win with Double Strike because control decks have boss cards that either have game-winning effects on play or, you know, just lead to the opponent taking tons and tons of damage inherently, whether they're triple strikers or some other sort of, you know, win condition there. Aggro decks haven't really played Champa in quite some time. Look at Supreme Kai of Time. You don't typically play Champa because you can't afford to mill a non-black card. If you mill one non-black card early in the game, that could literally stop you from awakening, so that's a big deal. And then you have the decks like Red Sin Shenron and SS4 Gogeta. Those two decks don't need to play Champa, nor did they really play it often. Sin Shenron definitely didn't play it because the Z leader has inherent double strike, as well as all of your other main attackers having at least double strike, if not triple strike. And the Gogeta deck could tech 1 to 2 Champa, but again, I don't really think you ever needed it, and many builds that we saw just didn't play the card. So you would think that Champa was more of a hit to the aggro decks, but really Champa causes a great loss for the mid-range decks, like the Crimsons, like anything else out there. Golden Frieza being another example. A lot of yellow decks. I guess yellow, maybe you could look at this as a yellow hit because Champa, as of late, has probably just been more of a yellow card than anything else because of the combination of Mirror Creator Absorbed, Swift Retaliation Cooler, and Further Instruction Champa. So I guess it is a pretty direct hit to yellow as well, but you do also have the hit to just every single mid-range deck that's not as fast as all the aggro decks, but also didn't have the crazy game-ending bombs that all the control decks have. So yeah, definitely a big hit to mid-range, and a lot of people are talking about the hit to Champa in relation to tournaments, especially competitive tournaments, going to time and, you know, resulting in unsatisfying victories and losses, because with the current time rules, it's pretty unsatisfying in the sense that whoever has the higher life wins, but higher life is not always indicative of who's winning that game, right? So that does lead to some feels bads, and games theoretically will go longer with Champa being banned. I mean, I think it's rather marginal. I wouldn't say it's like a whole turn later, like maybe games will go half a turn longer on average, because there are certainly turns where you can kill people whether you had Champa or not. And that doesn't necessarily mean the game is going to go a whole turn longer, if my analogy is kind of making sense. So, yeah, organized play takes a minor loss from Champa, but I don't really chalk it up as anything super significant. But, yeah, mid-range decks as a whole, going to have to just deal damage. I will say, though, I don't hate this hit because it is kind of nice to not always have to play in fear of the Champa. Like, if you're at 2 life, your opponent swings with leader, you know that leader's swing is not a swing you can interact with. You can't negate the skills of the leader typically. You can't pop a leader during battle. So you always have to play afraid of the double strike coming down. And now that's no longer a thing. So that's a minor win for everyone's sanity, I guess. But besides that, Champa, big loss for the mid-range decks. Alright, then we have the limit of Majin Buu, Assault of the Agent of Destruction. This is definitely a loss to blue overall because this was blue's best unison. Even with so many cards now being able to spot remove unisons, to hit a 4-cost unison on the spot, you pretty much had to be playing green. And even though green's gotten a lot of powerful cards lately, we still really haven't seen green break into the meta like maybe some of us predicted it would. So Buu was still very difficult for a lot of decks to deal with, but you of course had the blue mirror match where you could Gohan Beast it away. That was pretty strong. But besides that, Buu is a really big hit to these ramp decks because the ramp decks were able to play Buu an entire turn earlier than all the other blue decks in the game. So typically with Beerus, for example, you'd play your Z deck Whis on turn 2, and then that would leave you with 4 energy to play Buu on turn 3. Same thing with the new 21 deck. You're able to ramp on 2 via several different methods, and then you can play Buu on 3 if you happen to have it in your hand, which when it was at 4, that was pretty likely. Now that it's at 1, again, I don't mind this hit. This is one that I was talking about for a long time, but as I said, with all the new ways we got to deal with unisons, it didn't really feel like Boo necessarily had to be hit. But again, now there's only one Boo in the format. When you deal with the first one, it's gone, and that does feel pretty good. Like it's nice to know that you're not wasting an entire turn to attack into a Boo, to then just have your opponent play another one on the next turn and then set you back once again. So it is overall real feels good, but it is a big hit to these ramp decks. They now have even more vulnerability in the early game than they did, because turn 2 for these ramp decks pretty vulnerable. They're tapping out to ramp most of the time, and if you're up against an aggro matchup, that can be pretty deadly. But at least you're able to stabilize the next turn with a Boo unison. Now that is far less likely to happen, and you might even take a lot more damage on that turn 3 than you would have without the Boo unison. So definitely a big hit to ramp decks. All right, now let's talk about some winners of the ban list. Overall, I think aggro comes out a big winner of the set 20 power absorb ban list, mainly because Crimson is gone. So what Crimson really did was just check all the aggro decks because it had infinite combo power, thanks to all the cards it played in the main deck: Senzu Bean, UI Kamehameha, Beerus Destroys, Unbreakable Goku, combined with the leaders activate battle to literally just get out of 15k attacks for free, even sometimes 20k attacks if you had different cards under your leader like Videl or Vegeta harness power. So with Crimson going away, I do think the floodgates are kind of open for aggro again, namely Spring Tide of Time, Red Sun Shenron, SS4 Gogeta, those being the 3 main contenders. I think those decks have a lot more leeway now that the the deck with the highest combo power in the game is now banned, or at least the leader is banned. I do think this opens up some room for creativity though, where people can try to find the next best leader to play a Crimson Shell. And what is that shell necessarily? I think that shell is a leader that doesn't require too many main deck cards for its engine to work. Like Crimson, for example, all you had to do was play, again, some number of harness powers, like 4 Videl in my case, and then just an adequate number of sands, which is probably about half your deck, and it doesn't hurt that a lot of the great cards in the game are sands anyway. So once you do that, you can fill your deck with just good blue cards and just play Crimson. Now we have to find another leader that still works in that same way and can facilitate the high amount of combo power that Crimson had. I think a lot of other leaders are going to need a bit more engine included in their decks to function. Like Crimson really just needed the bare minimum to work, so it might be a lot harder to find a Crimson replacement. But until that happens, I do think that the floodgates are open up for aggro, and this compounds what we're talking about with the Boo hit. The Boo hit makes the ramp decks weaker and more susceptible to aggro, and if the mid-range decks aren't checking the aggro decks, that means the aggro decks should, in theory, do much better against the control decks. So I think in this kind of format we're looking at those 3 aggro decks that I've been naming. We have the control decks, like the ramp, maybe some new invoker stuff with set 20. And now mid-range is kind of just left to find its feet, right? And I think that there's a lot of hope in yellow right now with Trunks Vegeta, with a new Majin Vegeta leader, maybe even Golden Frieza. Those are probably some pretty solid mid-range decks. Will certain blue decks be able to step into that limelight? I mean, time will tell. I think it's rather likely, but we'll see, of course, with all that. And the final slide we have for today, guys, we have the Secret Identity Mass Sand unbanned. It's always pretty hype when a card is actually taken off the ban list, and that's what happened with Secret Identity Mass Sand here. So what is this going to cause? Well, we have Token Toa, which was probably the reason why Secret Identity was banned in the first place. This deck spams tokens to the board. Secret Identity happens to be a token sweeper that was playable for free. They banned it in release of Token Toa, but that deck never really did anything, so they figured, all right, why do we have this card banned when the reason we banned it just doesn't really make sense anymore. The other deck, though, that actually just won a recent regional right before set 20 released is Bulma, the deck that I hate super infamously, but the deck that my teammate Danny absolutely loves and just won't stop playing and ruining my playtesting. So with this deck, Secret Identity is actually incredible against it because Bulma relies on just spamming a ton of 1-cost blockers. So having a card that can hit up to 6 non-barrier blockers is a really big deal, and having this card back does make Bulma feel just a little bit more fair, even though when you play the Secret ID, they're just gonna play the bunny girl anyway and get blockers back and be really annoying. But at least it is a card that helps us combat this strategy. The other main thing to talk about with Secret ID is just whether or not it replaces Dark Broly outright. Dark Broly Heartless Berserker just became the overwhelming choice once Secret Identity Mass Sand and Bardock Fighting Against Fate got banned. Those 2 cards got banned. Dark Broly came out, free 30k, kills a guy on play. Yeah, it has 0 combo power, but that's never really been too big of an issue. It seems like Secret Identity Mass Sand is just gonna outright replace Dark Broly, because I think in like 90% of situations, Secret ID is just better. Like against your aggro matchups, being able to kill 2 cards instead of 1 is great. Being a token sweeper, also great. So if your opponent has like a blocker negate out and 2 battle cards you can hit, that is just way more value than Dark Broly. Yeah, Secret ID has 5k less attack power, but I mean 25k is still a great number to hit for. It has combo power, although again, like, you're typically not going to combo your Overwhelm unless you're in a really dire scenario. So that's sort of like a moot point, but the only situation where Dark Broly is better is when you need to hit one card that costs 7 or higher. A really interesting example of this is when people were playing Frieza Emperor of Universe 7 at Worlds. That was a card specifically played to make Crimson's life miserable, and while I don't think that card's going to see play for the immediate future because that was for a very specific format, I think having that type of Overwhelm to just spot remove that really annoying boss monster is kind of a big deal. Although again, that's a niche scenario where Secret Identity Masked Saiyan is probably just better, you know, 9 times out of 10. So that's what I'm thinking about that. But anyways, guys, there's the winners and losers of the ban list. Hope you guys found something helpful and informational about this video. If you did, let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.